Hello everyone and welcome back to Great Deltan. Apologies firstly for the lack of content. It's been an incredibly hectic few months. I've had a lot planned, been away a few times. I've moved onto permanent nights at work, so that has reduced the amount of time I've had on my hobbies, as I tend to do a lot of them here and there, the odd hour in the evening. I've also taken apart my Lego collection and been boxing that up for sale, so that's taken up quite some time as well. Nevertheless, I do have some progress for you because I have finished the layout framework now and it is entirely ready for track laying now. Apologies for the camera stability, I appear to have lost my tripod, but I will give you a full tour in this video of what's been achieved in that time, how I built things and the various function of elements of the layout. So firstly, the data about the garage. It's about 3 meters wide and 6 meters long, which has given me a fair bit of extra space compared to the previous layout, which was about 5 meters by 2.5 wide. Also, the garage door does open slightly differently, which has given me a little bit more space, and I will show you that later on. I did mention it in the video I put out quite a few months back, first introducing this garage layout, but I've also made some special additions to make the garage door sort of fold into the layout and utilise the space as much as I can to ensure that I get as much layout space as possible. So let's just go through one module of the layout. We'll go from back to front and I'll talk you through it. So immediately you can see I have these vertical pieces of wood attached to the wall the entirety of the layout all the way around, apart from the section that crosses over in front of the door. These provide the stability of the layout and also support the shelving and the layout surface. They're attached to the walls just via raw plugs and some decking screws. It's all CLS timber, which I got mainly from Marketplace and a little bit from Wix and B&Q. I find it a lot cheaper getting off Marketplace, but you do get the odd pieces of wood which aren't the best quality. They're roughly £2.50 a length, but in Wix and B&Q they're about £4, so I tried to sort of have a mix of even to get the quality I needed for the pits that needed to be straight, and then use the cheaper stuff for things like the bracing in the middle, which isn't as important. Next we come down, you can see I've got these back scenes here. This is just thin MDF painted in eggshell blue, and that perimeters the entirety of the layout as well. At the minute it's just fixed on with a few pins, but I do need to put some more nails in it as it's a little bit flexible in places. At the minute this is just acting as a temporary back scene until I decide actually what I want to do with the layout. Apologies, there's the cat. He always likes to come in and have a wander. But I just wanted something sort of generic sky blue to go in the background as I'm building the layout to make it feel a bit more realistic and make it look a bit prettier during its construction. From there we come forward and we've got the cross bracing, again all CLS timber held in with decking screws. It is pretty strong. I can climb and walk on this as I have had to in the past to get up to things like the shelf up there and fix the lights. So it is quite overkill for the amount of sturdiness I need for this layout, but at the end of the day I want it to be strong and I want it to last. From there, the front, we have this chipboard here, which is just painted in a wood primer to make it look sort of half professional. I got all that wood from work and I've just used it to create sort of a facade at the edge of the layout. This does serve two purposes. It hides any edges to things like embankments or valleys, rivers, whatever I want to do. And then it also provides a mounting surface for the electrics on the front. So speaking of electrics, I've got this trunking which runs the entire perimeter of the layout, and in here I have my 2 wires for my DCC bus, and that's just twin and earth stripped out from the insulation to their single cores. And what I'll do, sorry, cat's just knocked something off. What I will do is then drill holes through for the droppers, and then I can just solder them on here, and it's all nicely tucked away inside that trunking then. Eventually I will probably add a second trunking on top of this for the lighting power supply as well. Also what I have in here is this multi-core flex which I managed to get from work after a leftover project, and that provides the power to the sockets, of which there are 6 double sockets within the layout operator well. And then it also got the fuse spur at the front which powers the lights. And then if we come over here to the workbench, I've got another socket down here which provides me power to the workbench then. Much like the previous layout, all of this is wired into a single socket and then just plugged in into the garage socket. So I'm not touching the house electrics at all. So it's basically one giant extension lead. I'm not going to have too much on here which is going to pull too much power really. I imagine the thing that will draw the most current will be a heater for the garage in the winter time, but other than that I've just got my compressor, soldering iron, obviously the power for the actual DR5000 there, which powers the DCC bus, and that'll be how I control my layout. I've also got this fridge and freezer just here which are constantly on, but if you know much about those, they don't draw a lot of current at all really. And then the lights. I've got I have 8 LED battens which provide a ton of luminance. They're angled at 45 degrees to provide lighting not only downwards but also outwards. I found out with my previous layout that if you only have the lighting angled downwards, you get a lot of shadows on the side of the stock, and the weathering and fine details don't come out as good on the camera for videos and photos. So I've just pointed the lights out in all directions to try and provide a bit of better lighting at all angles. So that's the top of the layout. Moving underneath, you can see that all of the shelving space is sort of customized to fit exactly what I need under it. Over here I've got a big gap for when I eventually make my stock storage. Haven't quite decided what I'm going to use yet. I'd like to use some sort of pull-out tray system like you can with toolboxes, but they're quite expensive, so it might just be something sort of custom built. Over here we've got the workbench, which I will talk about in detail in a sec, and then we've just got some more storage for all of my random stuff which needs storing. And then obviously these are the Lego sets which I'm selling at the minute, so they're just in here temporary. Had to make certain accommodations for things like the gas pipe and the skirting. Obviously we've got the cutout here for the this is the waste stack from the ensuite and the downstairs toilet, so that obviously cuts into the layout a bit, but I have added this angled fillet on the front to create a bit more depth to the layout. Something else I will say about this layout as well is that I've made it about 200mm wider, well, deeper than the previous layout. The Great Deltan Mark II was only as wide as standard construction boards, which are about 610mm, whereas with this one, as I'm using the open frame technique, I've added a bit extra 200mm, and we've got a nice amount of depth now to get a bit more scenery, possibly a bit more tracks as well, and just keep things spaced out a bit nicer for a bit more realism. Right, now we are out the front of the layout, and you can see I've added this boarding sort of facade at the front just to hide everything. Obviously the backseam boards are attached to that as well, so that supports that. We've got a switch on the front for turning on the lights, as I buried the actual light switch for the garage deep within the framework somewhere. So this just allows me to turn on the lights before I crawl under and get into the middle. We've got these slots here, and these allow the springs of the garage to go into them, which means I can make the layout as close to the garage door as possible without it interfering with the mechanisms of how the garage door shuts. So overall on this layout, I'd say I'd have about an extra 1200mm on top of what I had on the previous layout, so it's a decent amount of space. Just going over here, you can see the layout in its entirety. It's going to be rather good, and it's going to be quite an exciting build really, because I've got a lot of space to do and got a lot of plans I want to execute really. Coming over to the workbench now. I did talk about this in my previous video, but I will quickly summarise it again for you. Because the layout is quite a bit higher this time than my previous one, I've had the space to add this workbench in, which allows me to save space and gives me a full area to do things like my loco programming, my weathering, installations of interior details, and even scratch building. I've got a decent space there. That oval there is not a standard oval. I'm going to be using it as my programming track, but this switch here allows me to isolate this curve as it's got insulated fish plates on from the rest of the oval, and that will allow me to test my stay alive installations as well. Got 3 sockets. At the minute the light is plugged into one of them. DI5000 into another, and then I've got a spare for when I use my soldering iron or the air compressor. That air compressor I do need to get an extension for, as I'd like to have an extra long hose to be able to reach all areas of the layout without actually having to move the compressor and be a bit more efficient. Other than that though, not really much to talk about here. I've got some trays down here which did have my screws and whatnot in. I'll be using those for things like people, various accessories and other train associated items. I've got some drawers here which at the minute just has my stock and a load of random other stuff. Got my iPad as well, which I'm currently using to control the layout. However, I will eventually buy another handset as it's just a bit more convenient. Modelling tools there, I've got some track to get started with, and then obviously I've got my stock, which is what I'm going to work on next before I get the track laying started. This has been sitting around for months now. I've got the decoders, I've got the stay alives, I've got all the weathering bits, got the people to go inside, so I just want to get this done and get this stock up to scratch, ready to run before I actually put a nail in a sleeper. So that will be where the next sort of allocation of my time goes towards, getting all that done. I will make a video series on that as well. Hopefully it shouldn't take too long. I'm just in a bit of a slump at the minute with motivation for getting these videos out, as I've got a lot on. But I'd like to think that once I get this done and get some track down, the motivation will start to come again and I'll get on with things fairly quickly. So thank you for joining me in this video. This has just provided a small update and I've told you where I'm at, which is now at the point where I can start track laying. Timescale wise, I can't give you a time frame of when I'm actually going to be able to get started. Like I said, I'll get that stock done. I've got a little bit of track, but I've got to get a fair bit more as well. I need to actually decide on a full track plan before I even get started, as I'm using the open frame method. I will be going from bottom up, so I don't just want to lay an oval of track and end up needing to build under it and not be able to access it for scenery and whatnot. But yeah, this has just obviously provided an update for you all. Hope you are still staying tuned for what's to come and interested in what I'm able to build. So yeah, thank you for continued interest in this layout, and I'll speak to you again hopefully within a few weeks, but might just be over a month or so. So thank you for watching, and bye bye.